This is digital draking from Devon. To be precise, this is Buckland Monachorum, Latin meaning the land of the monks. And this is a 13th century cistern monastery. It was owned by Sir Richard Grenville in the 1570s, and he sold it. And the purchaser was a very famous sailor who'd just been knighted by the Queen for circumnavigating the world, Sir Francis Drake. From his official £10,000 worth of treasure that he'd been given by the Queen for his efforts, he started investing in property, and he became the second largest property owner in Plymouth after the Hawkins family and the Plymouth Corporation. So he was the biggest single owner of property in Plymouth, and he expanded. He wanted a country seat. Unfortunately, 12 miles north of Plymouth, he was able to buy Buckland Abbey at a cost of £3,400, a slightly inflated cost in those days. And Sir Francis lived here, but nobody knows how much time he spent here. James Barber, the curator in 1982, told me straight away upon our acquaintance that Drake spent a lot of time in London. But since then, I've researched, and with the help of Susan Jackson, we've come up with all the evidence that shows when Drake was in residence. And it appears in my forthcoming booklet, Sir Francis Drake at Buckland Monachorum. Drake moved in probably at the end of 1581. There are 8 documents that we know testify to the transfer of ownership. And the first evidence that we have of Drake being in residence was in May 1582, when he receives Portugal's ambassador. And during that visit, Francis Drake is asked to compensate Portugal. The Portuguese pilot that Drake captured in the Cape Verde Islands on his world voyage, Nuno da Silva, and Drake agreed that he was going to compensate him. On the 1st of June that year, Francis Drake receives a letter from a fleet of ships anchored in Plymouth asking him to go and meet with them, because he was a sponsor in the ill-fated Fenton expedition, which was to capitalise upon Sir Francis Drake's contact with the Sultan of Ternate in the fabled Spice Islands in Indonesia. And more information comes also from the Plymouth Black Book. In 1583-84 tax year, there are messengers carrying letters by horse to Buckland Abbey, and on the 7th of September in that tax year, the King of Portugal, Dom Antonio, the Portuguese pretender, is entertained by Sir Francis Drake. It was in England's interest to have him installed upon the Portuguese throne after King Philip II had annexed Portugal. In September 1585, Drake is at Buckland entertaining Dom Antonio again, along with Sir Philip Sidney, one of the Queen's favourite courtiers. Sidney was down here trying to earn a position on Drake's forthcoming 1585-1586 voyage to the Cape Verde Islands and the West Indies. But Drake dare not take the Queen's favour against her will, and Sidney was summoned back to court. And 27th of July 1589, Drake writes a letter to the Privy Council stating that he cannot leave Buckland to visit London because his wife is ill. Now, in the tax year of 1589-1590, 2 occasions are logged as Corporation Council's expense of sending messengers by horse to Buckland Abbey. And in 1592 to 1593, Drake is at Buckland during his years ashore as a civic leader, and he attends a local tin works. Well, that would have been east of the house here, on the edge of Dartmoor, towards where Drake's Leat is. And in 1593 also, Drake rides from Billingsgate Wharf after he's released his hostage, Don Antonio de Valdez, the Spanish prisoner from the Armada days, and he rides to Esher and he collects his kinsman Francis Drake of Esher along with his son, which is Drake's godson, and with Mr. Pomfret, the boy's tutor, and they ride as far as Axminster and they stay at Drake's house. Francis Drake of Esher's brother or uncle's house, one of his relatives, and Drake and the boy and the tutor ride on to Buckland, and the boy, Drake's godson, spends 12 weeks here, and during that time Pomfret, being primed by Francis Drake of Esher, wants to find out if there is a mention in Drake's will for the boy, but he doesn't get a satisfactory answer because he wasn't mentioned, but he was given money and a jewel when he left. And in 1593 Drake is here entertaining 2 circuit judges, and Drake would have had his will written here, and when he left England on his final voyage, little did he know that he wouldn't ever see his country seat again, although he did write in his will that he would hazard his life. Behind me is the stereotypical classic view of Buckland Abbey, but this video goes into more detail about when Drake was actually here, because this element of Drake's residence at Buckland is largely unknown. And this is the end of the video, which I hope has been an enlightening experience.